The fluorescent lights of the Jinghilika industry are and lab hummed with an indifferent sterility, a stark contrast to the living, breathing creation Lin Zunong held in her hands. She had poured her soul into this new plum wine, a delicate balance of tradition and innovation she believed could save the struggling company. But the man standing before her, CEO Zhou Heng, saw only a liability. His gaze, sharp and cold as polished steel, swept over the unlabeled bottle before landing on her. "Trash," he said, his voice a low, cutting baritone that sliced through the lab's quiet tension. "Belongs in the trash can." The words struck Zunong like a physical blow. Her colleagues, frozen at their workstations, averted their eyes, the air thick with second-hand humiliation. All the sleepless nights, the meticulous testing, the unwavering belief in her craft all dismissed in a single, brutal judgment. A hot surge of defiance burned away the initial shock. Her knuckles whitened around the bottle. "It's not rubbish," she stated, her voice trembling but clear. She lifted her chin, meeting his icy stare without flinching. "Have you even tasted it, CEO Zhou? Or do you judge everything by its simple packaging?" A flicker of something surprise, annoyance, crossed Zhou Heng's impeccably handsome features. He was used to deference, to fear. This woman, with her plain lab coat and a smudge of yeast on her cheek, was challenging him. He had heard the rumors, of course, whispers of a hidden genius in the R&D department, a distiller with an almost magical touch, sidelined by office politics. He had dismissed it as corporate gossip, but now, faced with her unyielding gaze, a sliver of intrigue pierced his armor of arrogance. Before he could respond, the department head, Director Ma, scurried over, his face pale with panic. "CEO Zhou, please forgive her. She's young." Passionate, he grabbed Zunong's arm, pulling her back. Later, in the relative privacy of his small office, he wrung his hands. "Zunong, are you trying to get fired? Zhou Heng is a shark. He's looking for results, not rebellion." The board is breathing down his neck, ching his bleeding money. The director's words were still ringing in her ears when the official email landed in every employee's inbox. Zhou Heng was fast-tracking a new product launch. The R&D department had 30 days to deliver a market-ready bestseller. The final line was a guillotine hanging over their heads. Failure to meet this deadline will result in significant departmental restructuring and personnel reduction. Humiliation curdled into hardened resolve. Back in her lab, under the unforgiving hum of the lights, Zunong stared at her reflection in a polished fermentation tank. They saw trash. She would show them treasure. That night, exhaustion finally dragged her into a fitful sleep. She woke up abruptly, her heart hammering against her ribs. The air in her small apartment was cold, and a figure was standing at the foot of her bed. It was Zhou Heng, his silhouette unmistakable even in the gloom. But he was unclothed. The image was so vivid, so shockingly real, the clean lines of his shoulders, the stark confidence in his posture that she squeezed her eyes shut, a strangled cry catching in her throat. When she opened them again, he was gone. The hallucinations began to bleed into her waking hours. A fleeting glimpse of him in a passing bus window, wearing an absurd floral crown, the scent of his sharp, expensive cologne in her empty hallway. She was losing her mind. "Maybe he's your inner demon," her friend Emmy Eiling offered over the phone, her tone more amused than concerned. "You're stressed. You're obsessed with proving him wrong. So your brain is short-circuiting. Just fight him. Or, just sleep with him in your dreams and get it over with." The advice was useless, only deepening her anxiety. How could she focus on her life's most important project when her mind was being hijacked by these bizarre, intrusive fantasies? A few days later, the demon himself walked into her lab. Zhou Heng appeared without warning, his tailored suit a stark disruption in her world of glass beakers and stainless steel. He walked directly to her station, his eyes bypassing everyone else. "The new brew," he commanded, gesturing toward a freshly decanted sample. "Let me taste it." Her hands shook as she poured a small measure into a tasting glass. He took it, swirled the deep amber liquid, and inhaled its aroma. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Su Nong felt a mortifying blush creep up her neck, convinced he could somehow hear the frantic, nonsensical thoughts ricocheting inside her skull. "He's so close. His hands are. Why am I thinking about his hands?" She took a half step back, creating a buffer of air between them. He took a sip. His expression remained unreadable, his eyes closing for a moment. When they opened, they fixed on her. The finish is surprisingly clean. The compliment was so unexpected, so grudgingly delivered. It felt like another hallucination. Was this real? Or was her fractured mind conjuring a more palatable version of her tormentor? She felt a dizzying wave of disorientation, a desperate need to get away from him, to escape the chaotic collision of reality and delusion he inspired. That evening, as she fumbled with the keys to her apartment, a shadow fell over her. Zhou Heng was standing behind her, his presence trapping her against her own front door. "We need to talk about the wine," he said, his voice low. Her head swam. In the dim, flickering light of the corridor, she saw two of him. One was the stern CEO, his expression intense and focused. The other, a shimmering, translucent double, leaned closer, whispering things she couldn't quite hear but felt as a hot flush on her skin. She recalled, pressing herself against the door as if trying to merge with the wood. "Please," she stammered, her eyes darting between the real man and the phantom. "You should go. It's late." Zhou Heng's brow furrowed. He took a step closer, his gaze sharp and analytical as he studied her erratic behavior, her wide, panicked eyes. He was seeing not just defiance, but a deep, unnerving fear. "Lin Zhu Nong," he said, his voice dropping, becoming softer, more probing. "Forget the wine for a moment. Tell me when you look at me, what is it that you truly see?" The ballroom buzzed with the polite hum of corporate success. Crystal flutes clinked, and the press aimed their cameras at the stage, where a single bottle of wine sat illuminated like a holy relic. It was Zhu Nong's creation, a distilled spirit posing as a white wine, its translucent body shimmering with a hint of gold. It tasted of osmanthus and distant rain, a poem she had painstakingly written in liquid form over sleepless nights. On stage, director Ma beamed, his unctuous smile stretching across his face. "Through tireless innovation and my personal leadership," he announced into the microphone, his voice echoing with false modesty, "the R&D department is proud to present First Light. It is the culmination of a vision I have nurtured for years." A wave of polite applause rippled through the room. Su Nong, standing near the back, felt the sound like a physical blow. The air rushed from her lungs, leaving a cold, hollow space where her pride had been. Her vision, her poem had been stolen and was now being recited by a plagiarist. From his seat in the front row, Zhou Heng's posture went rigid. He took a slow, deliberate sip from his glass, his eyes narrowing. The taste was unmistakable. It was the same rebellious, delicate flavor profile from the sample he'd found on his desk, the one that had defied all company conventions, the one that belonged to Lin Zhu Nong. It tasted of her quiet defiance, not Director Ma's blustering ambition. As the applause died down, Zhou Heng stood. A glacial stillness fell over the room. "Director Ma," he said, his voice cutting through the celebratory atmosphere like fracturing ice. "An impressive achievement. Tell me, who specifically was the lead developer on this project?" A bead of sweat trickled down Director Ma's temple. "It was a team effort, CEO Zhou. But, as director, I guided the process from conception to completion." "I see," Jo Heng's gaze swept the room, finally landing on Zhu Nong, who stood frozen, her face a pale mask of shock. Lin Zhu Nong, you're from the R&D department. Was this your project? Every eye in the room swiveled to her. This was her chance. To scream, to fight, to claim what was hers. But looking at the sea of expectant faces, at Director Mo's panicked glare, a familiar wave of weary resignation washed over her. To fight was to cause a scene, to be labeled difficult, to invite more scrutiny and more pain. It was a game she didn't know how to win. Director Ma jumped in, his voice slick with manufactured camaraderie. Yes. Zhu Nong was a great assistant. She and I worked very closely on this. Zhu Nong's heart fractured. He had not only stolen her work, but he had also demoted her to a mere helper in her own story. She looked at Jo Heng, at the cold fury simmering in his eyes, and knew he expected a fight from her. But she had no fight left. She gave a short, almost imperceptible nod, a silence, a confession she didn't intend to make. That was all it took. For Jo Heng, her silence wasn't self-sacrifice. It was complicity. It was weakness. A lie. His disappointment was swift and absolute, curdling into a white-hot anger. He had seen a spark in her, a defiant talent he thought was unique. Now, he believed she was just another cog in a deceitful machine. Pack your things, he said, his voice dangerously low and directed solely at her. The microphone was off, but his words carried the weight of a public execution. You're fired. The world tilted. Heartbroken and utterly misunderstood, Zhu Nong didn't argue. She turned without a word, her silence her only shield, and walked out of the ballroom. As she numbly cleared her desk, placing her few personal items into a small cardboard box, Jo Heng appeared at the doorway of the office floor, his expression a storm of bewilderment and rage. He had expected tears, excuses, a desperate plea. Her quiet, dignified acceptance unnerved him more than any outburst would have. She walked past him, heading for the elevator, but just as the door slid open, she stopped and turned. Come with me, she said, her voice quiet but firm. It was not a request. Confused and still furious, but compelled by a force he couldn't name, he followed. She didn't lead him to a bar to plead her case or to a lawyer's office to threaten a suit. She led him, in the deepening twilight, to a small, worn-down children's park nestled between aging apartment buildings. The plastic on the slide was faded, and the swing set groaned with a weary rhythm. She sat on one of the swings, the box at her feet. When I was a girl, she began, her voice soft, my father told me that if you worked hard enough, you could build anything, even a castle in the sky. She gestured to the simple park. I don't want a castle. I just want this. A small home, a garden for my father, the freedom to create things that are honest. She finally looked at him, her eyes clear of artifice. That wine, it was my application. Not for a promotion. It was my proof to myself that I could build something real. Jo Heng stood motionless, the sharp edges of his anger being sanded down by the raw sincerity in her voice. He saw her then, not as an incompetent employee or a conspirator, but as a dreamer in a world that rewarded predators. His decision had been just by corporate law, but it felt fundamentally wrong. You are not fired, he stated, the words feeling heavy and inadequate. The company will release a statement amending the credit. It will be officially listed as a joint development between you and the R&D department. It was a compromise, a CEO's solution to a human problem. He took a step closer. But you have to stop this. Stop hiding behind silence. If you want something, you have to fight for it. Let people see who you really are. A fragile truce settled between them. Instead of parting ways, she led him again, This time through winding alleys to a tiny, steamy eatery called Aunt May's Noodles. The air was thick with the scent of bone broth and star anise. This was her secret place, her haven. As they sat at a small wooden table, she began to talk. She spoke of her grandfather, a traditional brewer in her village, and the lessons he taught her about patience and respect for the ingredients. She explained how First Light was an homage to him, a fusion of ancient fermentation techniques with modern distillation. The passion in her voice was intoxicating, her hands moving as she described the delicate process. Joe Heng listened, saying little. He watched the way the warm light of the tiny restaurant softened the defensive lines around her eyes, the way she came alive when speaking of her craft. Here, away from the fluorescent lights and polished lies of his world, he saw the real Lin Zunong. She wasn't just a talented winemaker. She was a guardian of a legacy, a woman of deep integrity and quiet strength. And as he watched her, a startling realization bloomed in his chest. His admiration was no longer just professional. It was becoming something more. Something deeper and far more complicated. The shift in Joe Heng was as disorienting as it was sudden. One day, he was the exacting, distant CEO. The next, he was standing outside her office with a stick of glistening candy paws, a nostalgic treat from a street vendor. He offered it to her without a word, his usual intimidating awe replaced by an awkward, almost boyish hopefulness. Zunong accepted it, the crisp sugar shell cracking under her teeth, the sweet and sour taste a confusing counterpoint to the turmoil he stirred within her. His pursuit was a series of such quiet gestures, until it became deafeningly loud. At a product launch party swarming with media and influencers, a notorious online celebrity known as Ace cornered her. Ace, whose real name was Guyu, was known for his aggressive live-streaming stunts, and he saw Zunong as his next viral conquest. He shoved his phone, camera rolling, into her face. "Tell my fans, is the brilliant winemaker Lin as sweet as her wine?" He sneered, his arms snaking around her waist. Before Zunong could shove him away, a cold, unyielding force intervened. Joe Heng materialized beside them, his hand clamping down on Guyu's wrist with chilling precision. "Take your hands off her," he commanded, his voice low and devoid of its usual corporate polish. It was raw, possessive. He pulled Zunong behind him, a human shield against the flashing cameras and Guyu's stunned face. The moment went viral before they had even left the building. The internet, predictably, exploded. The story spun out of control, weaving a lurid tapestry of lies. Screenshots from Guyu's stream were juxtaposed with paparazzi photos of Joe Heng handing her the candied horse. The narrative was simple and ugly. Lin Zunong was a master manipulator, a social climber sleeping with both a powerful CEO and a famous influencer to get ahead. Her phone became a vessel of pure poison. Notifications chimed with an endless stream of vitriol. "Slut. Gold digger. How much for a night? Bitch." They called her a disgrace to winemakers, a stain on Joe Heng's company. The accusations were a tidal wave of filth meant to drown her. Yet, as the storm raged, a strange calm settled over Zunong. She remembered nights spent hiding under her bed as a child, listening to the sound of her father's drunken rages and her mother's weeping. She had learned long ago how to build a fortress inside herself. This was just another kind of nose. With a quiet finality, she turned off her phone, disconnected her computer from the Wi-Fi, and walked into the winery's cellars. The cool, damp air smelled of oak and earth and patience. Here, surrounded by barrels of aging wine, she could work. The world outside could scream itself hoarse. She would not dignify it with a response. A day later, the first crack appeared in the wall of lies. Guyu, looking pale and chastened, posted a formal apology video. He confessed the love confession stunt was a pre-planned promotional bit for a new brand, a scripted act he had taken too far. He clarified that he and Ms. Lin had no personal relationship whatsoever. It was a partial vindication, but it only made the public's focus on her connection with Zhou Heng more intense. Then, Zhou Heng set the world on fire. During a scheduled press conference for his company's quarterly earnings, a reporter dared to ask the question on everyone's mind, Mr. Zhou, regarding the recent rumors surrounding yourself and winemaker Lin Zunong. Do you have any comment? Zhou Heng stood at the podium, a portrait of unnerving calm. He looked directly into the sea of cameras, his gaze so intense it felt as though he was speaking to each viewer personally. He didn't deflect. He didn't evade. He leaned into the microphone, and the entire room held its breath. There are no rumors, he stated, his voice clear and resonant. There are only facts that have been distorted. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The first fact is that I am pursuing her with every intention of a serious commitment. The second fact is that any attack on her character is an attack on me. He looked up, his eyes sweeping across the stunned faces of the press. Then he delivered the final, devastating blow. And the third, most important fact is this. Lin Zunong is the one I want to marry. The room erupted. Flashes strobed like lightning. Reporters shouted over one another. He had not just defended her, he had publicly claimed her, building a fortress around her with a single, irrefutable declaration. Zunong saw the clip on a colleague's tablet. She watched him say the words, his face grimly determined, and her breath hitched in her chest. The noise from the screen, the shouting, the clicking cameras felt a million miles away. All she could hear was the frantic pounding of her own heart. A wave of overwhelming relief washed over her, so potent it made her knees weak. He saw her. He believed in her. He stood for her. That evening, he found her in the quiet solitude of the vineyard, the setting sun painting the vines in hues of gold and rose. He looked at her, his expression softer now. The fierce CEO replaced by a man waiting for his verdict. You didn't have to do that, she whispered, her voice tight with emotion. Yes, he said simply, stepping closer. I did. I told you. I'm serious about you. A strange, painful knot formed in her throat. She felt his love, a real and powerful thing. But it was wrapped in a word that terrified her. Marriage. The word didn't conjure images of white tresses and happy endings. It brought back the smell of stale liquor, the sound of broken promises, the ghost of her father's failures. Zhou Heng, she began, her gaze dropping to the rich soil at her feet. I appreciate everything you did, and my feelings for you are real. She finally forced herself to meet his eyes, letting him see the fear she had hidden for so long. But I can't make promises about marriage. It's not about you. It's a promise I'm not sure I know how to keep. The sterile perfection of Zhou Heng's minimalist penthouse felt like a different galaxy from her own cluttered, chaotic world. Glass walls framed the glittering city below, each light a distant, orderly star. They sat on a low, cream-colored sofa, a bottle of her award-winning wine breathing on the table between them. I don't think about marriage, Zunong said, swirling the deep crimson liquid in her glass. The statement hung in the quiet, a stark contrast to the implicit question in the air. I think about freedom, building something that's entirely my own. Zhou Heng watched her, his expression unreadable. Freedom and commitment aren't mutually exclusive. A foundation makes a building stronger. It doesn't trap it. To you, maybe it's a foundation, she countered, her voice softer than she intended. To me, it feels like inheriting someone else's architecture. I want to draw my own blueprints. She was thinking of her father, of the crumbling structure of her own family, the constant repairs, the fear of total collapse. She could never subject someone like Zhou Heng to that kind of instability. As if summoned by the thought of family, the elevator doors chimed softly. A distinguished couple, elegant in a way that spoke of old money and quiet authority, stepped into the living room. Cho Heng's parents. His posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. Heng, we were just downstairs visiting the Liz, his mother said, her warm smile not quite reaching her assessing eyes as they landed on Zhu Nong. We didn't realize you had a guest. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Zhu Nong. She stood, suddenly feeling underdressed and out of place. Cho Heng introduced her simply as Lin Zhu Nong, a brilliant winemaker. The conversation that followed was a polite, excruciating dance. His mother, Mrs. Cho, asked about her work, her ambitions, and then, the inevitable question. Your family must be so proud. What do your parents do? The Li came easily, a well-worn shield. My mother passed away. My father, he's retired. She omitted the part where his retirement consisted of cheap liquor and hazy, regret-filled afternoons. The shame was a familiar weight in her chest. The meeting ended as swiftly as it began, but the pressure it left behind was immense. The chasm between their worlds had never felt wider. Days later, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. It was a doctor from the city's best private rehabilitation center. Miss Lin, we're calling regarding your father, Lin Guoqiang. All his admission and treatment costs have been arranged by Mr. Cho. The world tilted. Zhu Nong gripped the phone, her knuckles white. Cho Heng, he had never mentioned it. He had seen the fault lines in her foundation, the source of her deepest anxieties that she had so carefully hidden, and instead of running, he had quietly started sending engineers. He had gone straight to the root of her fear and begun the painstaking work of healing it. All without a word. Visiting the hospital was surreal. Her father sat by a window, his hands steady for the first time in years. The roomy, unfocused look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a clarity that was both startling and heartbreaking. He looked older, more fragile, but he was present. He's a good man, Zinong, her father said, his voice raspy but firm. The doctor's the therapy he arranged the best. Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. It wasn't a grand, romantic gesture. It was something far more profound. It was a selfless, silent act of care that respected her struggle without patronizing her. He wasn't trying to buy her or fix her. He was giving her back the one thing she craved most, the hope of a stable foundation, one she could finally build upon. That night, a sleek black van screeched to a halt beside her as she left the winery. The door slid open, and the figure in a black hoodie and a grinning mask pulled her inside. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but before true fear could take root, she recognized the driver's profile from the online gaming world. JJ. Her phone was pressed into her hand. Cho Heng's name was on the screen. Answer it. Put it on speaker. The masked man's electronically disguised voice commanded. She did, her hand trembling. Cho Heng, Zhu Nong, are you okay? Where are you? His voice was dangerously calm. The kind of calm that precedes a storm. That depends on you, the masked man. JJ. Cut in. Your little winemaker for a controlling stake in Jinglica. A fair trade, wouldn't you say? CEO Joe. Zhu Nong's breath caught. This was insane. It had to be a test, a twisted game. There was no hesitation on the other end of the line. Not a second of calculation. Done. Joe Heng said, his voice like flint. Send me the transfer documents. Just don't touch her. A company your grandfather built. JJ taunted, all for her. Anything. Joe Heng bit out. The word raw with protective fury. Just let her go. The masked man let out a whoop of laughter. He pulled off the mask, revealing the handsome, mischievous face of Yi Jing, Joe Heng's younger brother, the elusive co-founder of Jing, and the legendary gamer she knew as both Ice and Gyu. Well, sister-in-law, Yi Jing grinned, tossing the voice changer onto the seat. Looks like he passed. You're stuck with my ridiculously dramatic brother now. The van pulled over, and Joe Heng's car was already there, its headlights cutting through the dark. He wrenched the van door open, his eyes wild with relief and fury as they landed first on her, then on his brother. Zhu Nong stepped out, her legs unsteady. The mysteries, the hallucinations of the game ice. The corporate power plays, it all snapped into place. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the look on Joe Heng's face. What mattered was the word anything. He hadn't built a foundation for her. He was the foundation. Unconventional, intense, and utterly unwavering. And for the first time, standing on that solid ground, she wasn't afraid of building a life. The car climbed, leaving the glittering necklace of the city far below. When the engine finally fell silent, the only sound was the wind, a low hum that seemed to carry the secrets of the mountains. Joe Heng led Lin Zhu Nong by the hand, his grip warm and steady, guiding her along a stone-paved path to a secluded overlook. They stood on the edge of the world. Below them, a sea of clouds swirled like cream in coffee, obscuring everything but the highest peaks, which jutted out like islands in a vast, white ocean. It was breathtaking. A view so unreal it felt like a dream. You said you wanted your own island. Joe Heng's voice was a low murmur against the wind. A place where your wine could have its own terroir, its own soul. I can't give you an island, Zhu Nong, but I can give you a world. He turned to face her, his dark eyes searching hers, stripped of his usual corporate armor. Here, he was just a man, vulnerable and utterly sincere. I know what you think, that I'm trying to buy you, to fix your problems with money because it's the only way I know how. And maybe at first, that's what it was. But then I saw you. I saw how you fought, how you refused to bend, how you looked at a handful of soul and saw a story. Zhu Nong's heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. This felt different from his previous, almost transactional attempts to pull her into his orbit. This was raw. He took both her hands in his. Your father's medical bills are taken care of. Your winery is safe. I didn't do it to own you. I did it because I couldn't stand by and watch the person who showed me what passion looks like lose everything she's ever worked for. I did it so you could be free. He paused, his thumb tracing a line over her knuckles. Free to stand here with me. Not out of obligation, but because you choose to. Free to see me not as a CEO or a solution, but as a man who sees strange, impossible things when he's with you. He was referring to her hallucinations, the strange, shared visions that had been both a torment and an unexplainable bond between them. By acknowledging them, he was acknowledging the deepest, most confusing part of her reality, and accepting it as his own. Lin Zhu Nong, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Forget the contracts. Forget the money. Forget everything else. Just look at me and tell me if you can build a future with me. Will you marry me? The wind whipped a strand of hair across her face, and she didn't bother to brush it away. For so long, her principles had been her shield. Independence was her creed, a fortress she had built around a heart bruised by condescension and betrayal. Accepting his help had felt like a surrender, a violation of her very identity. But standing here, on this mountain that felt like the top of their shared world, she finally understood. His help wasn't a cage. It was a key. He hadn't solved her problems. He had cleared the path so she could solve them herself. He wasn't saving her. He was standing beside her, ready to fight with her. A slow, radiant smile spread across her lips, chasing away the last shadows of doubt. The reluctance that had lived in her chest for so long finally dissolved, replaced by feelings so light and effervescent it felt like joy. Joe Heng, she said, her voice clear and steady above the wind. I do like you. It was a simple and adorned truth, more powerful than any flowery prose. It was the confession he'd been waiting for, the one she'd been too afraid to admit even to herself. His breath hitched, a flicker of disbelief and overwhelming relief in his eyes. She squeezed his hands. Yes, I'll marry you. The world seemed to fall away as he closed the distance between them. The kiss wasn't a conquest, but a homecoming. It was the taste of cool mountain air and a warmth that started deep in her soul. It was an acceptance of their strange, intertwined fate, a sealing of a promise that their future, however illogical, would be built together. She let go of her stubborn pride, her fear of being indebted, and simply held on to him, her partner, her island in the sky. The soft light of dusk filtered through the floor-to-ceiling glass of the wedding venue, painting the scene in hues of gold and rose. White roses and delicate gypsophila cascaded from every surface, their fragrance mingling with the celebratory hum of quiet conversation. Friends, family, and even a few of the winery staff who had stood by her were gathered, their faces reflecting the joy of the moment. Lin Zunong felt as if she were floating. Her white gown was simple and elegant, moving with a grace that felt entirely her own. But the real radiance came from within. As she stood opposite Zhou Heng, his hand holding hers at the altar, the past felt like a distant country she had once visited. Zhou Heng turned to her, his smile gentle, his eyes holding a universe of adoration. The officiant had just finished speaking, and now it was his turn. They say the best wine, he began, his voice resonating through the hushed room, is a reflection of its terroir. It's the soul, the sun, the struggle of the vines that gives it a unique soul. Zunong, you have the most incredible soul I have ever known. He looked directly at her, and the crowd faded into a blur. You have faced hardship and betrayal. You've been underestimated and dismissed. But you never once changed your essence. You taught me that value isn't determined by a price tag, but by integrity, passion, and the courage to stay true to yourself. People think I gave you a safety net. The truth is, you gave me a reason to be a better man.